Now we'll hear historic remarks from Paul Christian, Fire Department historian and former Boston Fire Department commissioner.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. This is certainly a historic event. This site, I'm happy to see, is being preserved for future generations. Over the years in my career at the Boston Fire Department, I cannot tell you the number of times I have brought visitors to this very site. Fire officials from the United Kingdom, from Ireland, Australia, Japan, former fire commissioner, the late John O'Hagan, New York Fire Department. First time he was in Boston, I was assigned to take him around. He wanted to come to this site. This is truly hallowed grounds we stand on today. And the marking of this street is Coconut Grove Lane will ensure that future generations come here to contemplate and think of what took place here on that horrific night. We don't dwell on the horrors that went on, but we like to focus on the good that did come out of this terrible event. As one stands here today, though, the significance of this street is this line that follows right back to that dwelling behind us. You folks right here in the forward part going down towards the garage are actually sitting in what was the caricature bar. We're about 30 feet back, or the back 2/3 was the main dining room. About halfway back on that fence along the wall is where the terrace was. That is where Buck Jones, the cowboy, was sitting with the movie executives when the fire broke out. Going from this fence line towards the south was the foyer. The revolving door was down there. Below this area here was the Melody Lounge where the fire broke out. Further over into this garage was the new Broadway Lounge. Behind us you can see the remnants of what was Broadway, and that was where the fire finally extended into. The events that night were all put together to form a perfect storm for a fire condition. If one or two of those items had been changed, this tragedy would not have occurred. Probably the most significant was the exits that night, the means of egress. From down below the Melody Lounge, as the people come up the stairs, the doorway at the top was locked, it was shut, so none of the patrons could escape without paying their bill. Coming forward into the foyer as the fire burst up, came forward was the terrible revolving doors where so many people were trapped. The fire broke into the main dining room, into the caricature bar. Windows along Charlotte Street to the back were blocked. No one knew they were there. There was no way out of the caricature bar except to come back through to the main lobby here, the foyer. The fire spread rapidly beyond the stage in this main dining room and went right into the new Broadway Lounge. There the exit doors opened inward. There was no way for those people to get out. Over 1,000 people were in this main dining room. We were about 60 feet by 60 feet square. The interior finish that night was a major factor contributing to the spread of that fire. Down in the Melody Lounge where the fire broke out, there was fabric draped across wood furring in the ceiling. There was leatherette seating. There was combustibles throughout the building, things that aren't allowed today. The overcrowding, as I mentioned, was horrific. Throughout the night as people arrived, they weren't turned away, they were brought in. They were set up additional tables. The place was totally packed. The fire was, the notification of the fire was delayed. People didn't know about it. There was no alarm system. People in the Broadway Lounge, when they first heard the cries of fire, thought it was a fight. They thought a fight had broken out in the club until the flames broke through. One thing that has always impressed me throughout my career in the fire service, still impresses me today, is the speed and velocity at which fire travels. Anyone that's ever anywhere and you hear a fire alarm, take action immediately. The speed of the fire that night was absolutely horrific. More significant that night, too, was the absence of sprinklers. It wasn't until 61 years later, the horrific Station nightclub fire down in Rhode Island, the state of Massachusetts was finally able to get a law in place requiring sprinklers and occupancies such as these. Other catastrophes have similar events taken place over the years. We only have to look back to 1977, the Kentucky Beverly Hills nightclub fire, similar results. The MGM hotel fire in Las Vegas in 1980. It's very clear that the lessons have to be reminded to us quite often. The fire commissioner back in 1942 was William Arthur Riley. Just to let you know what the mood was in Boston back in 1942 in November in the Boston Fire Department. A little known fact was 2 weeks earlier, there was a 5-alarm fire in East Boston at Maverick Square. 6 Boston firefighters were killed in the line of duty. On the Tuesday before this Cocoanut Grove fire, a memorial mass was held at the Holy Cross Cathedral in the South End, not too far from here. So the mood of the Boston Fire Department was extremely somber in that late November. 6 firefighters were dead, dozens were still in the hospital. One of those hospitalized in Boston City with a fractured skull was Captain John B. Stapleton. He would go on to become chief of the Boston Fire Department and father of Fire Commissioner Leo Stapleton. Leo Stapleton told me when he went in to visit his father the next morning after the fire, his father said something terrible must have happened. There was a lot of commotion in the hospital last night. Commissioner Riley started an inquest in to see what happened the very next morning. The people of the city were angry. They wanted answers. One of the first witnesses was from the NFPA. He cited incompetent enforcement of existing laws, political influence in building permits, and careless management at the site. Changes took place immediately. Commissioner Frazier has referred to a few. One of the first ones was the banning of revolving doors. Later they were re-allowed. You'll see them in buildings in Boston, but they're only permitted when they have swinging doors on each side. Immediately the Boston Fire Department established a position of department chemist where all materials must be tested before they're allowed to be put in any places of assembly in Boston. This has grown today, and today the Boston Fire Department has full-time fire protection engineers on staff to make sure that these regulations are followed out. Additionally, the fire department started nightclub inspections. We would send inspectors out to the premises to make sure that the doors were operable, that the overcrowding wasn't taking place, that the aisle spaces were being maintained. Another important feature that took place following the Cocoanut Grove fire was given the authority being given to the head of the fire department to cause inspections. At the time of the Cocoanut Grove fire in Boston, you had many governing authorities: the licensing board, building department, the police department, and the fire department. In 1945, the state law gave the fire department the authority to contaminate premises in any reasonable hour, to investigate causes of conditions which could contribute to a fire, or to hinder people from being able to evacuate the premises. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, 10 years ago, we were able to get the sprinkler law in place, which has saved countless lives. The lessons of the Cocoanut Grove are clear, and just as important today as they were in 1942. But it was only through constant vigilance that tragedies like these can be avoided in the future. Thank you.